Okay. So we have 5 books of the Torah, and Torah is a book of instructions, instruction manual, which means mitzvahs, largely, although there's a lot to learn from the stories. But in the more concrete sense, it's the mitzvahs that were given at Mount Sinai. The first book of the Torah is pre-Sinai. First book of the Torah is about our unfolding as a people, the unfolding of Hebrews, Jews, Judaism, the relationship we have with God. And we finished the Jewish world completed that yesterday in synagogues around the world. The first book. First book begins with creation, ends with the passing of Jacob. We have, roughly speaking, 3 generations of patriarchs and matriarchs, starting Abraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov, Jacob, and his wives. They have gone down to Egypt. The family of Hebrews, Jacob lives in Egypt for 17 years because, if you remember, his son Joseph has been sold into slavery there, rises to the top of Egyptian society. He's running the Egyptian economy. He sends for his family, for his elderly father, and he says, I'm doing well here, I'll take care of you all. He sets up the first ghetto, a place called Goshen. Jews can live there. At that point, there was whatever reasons there were for separation there, but the Jews are pretty much thriving in Egyptian society. And then Jacob passes on. And the book we've been using until now was reflecting the classes on the first book of the Torah. This week, we shifted to the second book of the Torah. Second book of the Torah begins with the Jews in Egypt, and it almost immediately pivots to the slavery. For the next 4 or 5 Torah portions, there's going to be the story we speak about every year in Passover: slavery, the redemption. It's basically 4 Torah portions. Now, we're going to zero in today on something about Moses, and Moses and one of his interactions with Pharaoh. We don't want to, it's not really so micro as a specific conversation. We're talking about worldviews. The Moses worldview versus the Pharaoh worldview, and how it's reflected in what went on between them, the conversation between them. And as a preface for what we're going to be analyzing and exploring today, there's a Mishnah, which, if I was on the editorial board, I probably would have put it in here because it's a good framing for all of this. There is a Mishnah, a piece of Talmud, where there's a quote from the great 1st century sage Hillel. That's where they got the name for the Hillel house. And Hillel was a leader of the Jewish people, and he's quoted quite a bit in the Talmud. And one of the things he says is, it's really like a 2-pronged statement. He says, Im ein ani li mili, if I am not for myself, who is or who will be for me? I got to take care of myself. God gave me a life, and I got to be responsible for myself. Then but there's a comma after that, not a period conceptually. And what he says is that, Ukshani la'atzmi ma'ani, but if I'm only for myself, then what am I? So Hillel gives us a very important perspective on life. I got up this morning. I had my yogurt. I took care of myself. I shouted, who else is going to take care of that for me? I'm a big boy now. I got to take care of myself. And I thought about whatever I need to do for today. So Hillel says, that's great. That's phase 1 of this sentence that encapsulates our mission in life. But phase 2 is very important. What has to go together with that is taking care of myself is because I have a mission in life. I need to be a conduit for goodness and constructiveness in the world. I need to be useful to the world, to people, to the world. Maybe I'm not going to get headlines that I did something that's good globally, but if I make someone smile, that's good for the world. Everybody has the opportunity to be and the responsibility to be a tool for goodness. So the idea is I take care of myself, but I take care of myself why? Because I'm number one, because I'm looking out for number one. I look out for myself because that's my responsibility, and I am here, I exist every single day with a certain sense of other. Like, why? It's not just for me to be able to brush my teeth. It's not just for me able to be able to have my yogurt. It's because I've got to be in good shape so that others can benefit. The world can benefit from my existence. That's not as a rabbi, it's as a human being. We all have some sphere of influence, or we can find some sphere of influence. We can all do something to make the world brighter. Now, in order to make the world brighter, I gotta have a roof over my head. I gotta have a living. I have a lot of things I need for me to be in shape to be of help to others. But for me to be in shape, is not the end of the game. It's for me to be in shape so that I can be who God created me to be. And God did not create me to be just a very happy or self-sustaining human being. It's a self-sustaining human being, an independent human being who has learned how to be interdependent and connect with others. So I think that is an important and very helpful framing of today's conversation. So let's start this off. Oh, thanks a lot, David. Oh, I think I have my head attached to my shoulders. All right. We're going to start on text 1. So here we have in text 1 a little bit of backdrop to this. In the scripture, as we open this week's Torah portion, it pretty quickly goes into a few very relevant points for today's understanding today. The Jews, while they had been honored citizens, eventually xenophobia, selfishness, whatever got into the mindset of the leadership. Pharaoh, a new Pharaoh or a new-minded Pharaoh wants to enslave them. They've forgotten what the Jews did for them centuries before. What have you done for me lately? These are people, they're foreigners, and they want to subjugate the Hebrews. They're not Jews yet, but they're Hebrews. We read there that a family from the tribe of Levi, and this is relevant in understanding the nuances of what we're going to read here. There are 12 tribes. Actually, at that point, it's really 13 tribes at some level. And Levi is one of the tribes. And to a family from the tribe of Levi, gave birth to a lady, gives birth to a boy, her name of Levi named Yocheved, gives birth to a baby boy, and we're not told what his name is, but this boy, because there has been a decree from Pharaoh that all Jewish males be killed, be thrown into the river. She wants to save her child, so she puts this little baby boy. Again, we're not told what his name is or what name she gave him, but she puts this little baby boy into a little boat to try to save him, because they were keeping track of who's pregnant and when they're due to give birth, and she expected governmental people to come soon to get him. And his sister Miriam watches from a distance to see how, his older sister is watching to see how he has 2 older siblings, one a boy, one a girl, one named Aaron, one named Miriam, and she is watching to see how it goes. And Pharaoh's daughter comes to bathe in the river. She takes home she finds this baby boy, and she takes home this baby boy and raises him as her own. So he's an adopted grandson to Pharaoh. Not all of that is so relevant for now. The rest of it, where the narrative goes, is that he eventually stands up for his brethren. He recognizes that he's a Jew, a Hebrew, he stands up in a case where he sees an Egyptian taskmaster persecuting, physically hurting a Hebrew, and Pharaoh sentences him to death. He runs away, and when he comes where he becomes a shepherd, and he has this encounter with a burning bush where God speaks to him and says, "It's up to you to go free the Jewish people." So he goes back to Egypt. So he went to a place outside of Egypt in Midian, and he meets his brother, and together they go to Pharaoh to say, "Let my people go." That's all kind of I think, pretty familiar part of the Seder narrative. Now, where we're opening the scene here in text 1 is that they come to Pharaoh. And again, as I said, and it is relevant here, in the first few texts, they are from the tribe of Levi. They get access to Pharaoh, and they demand that the Jews be freed. And Pharaoh dismisses them. And one of the things he says to them in text 1 is, "Why, Moses and Aaron, do you disturb the people? Return to your labors." Why are you making a ruckus? You're making a tumult here. He says, and you're disturbing your own people. We have them in a situation. They're not complaining. They're working. You're a rebel. Return to your labors. Now, to whom does he say return to your labors? Some people, commentators would say he says to the people, because they were kind of rustling up. Or it seems more a cleaner, just in a literary sense, is the way of reading is a return to your labors. You go back to whatever you're doing. Moses and Aaron, go back to what you're doing. So he rejects them. Says, "Get out of my face. Why are you disturbing everyone? And go back to your labors." Now, that could mean, one would think, that they have their own labors. They're Jews, and Jews are slaves. The reason that doesn't really work is because we'll see two pieces of text 2a, in text 2, starting with 2a. We're told in 2a that historically, when the Egyptians first compelled the Jews to work for them, Pharaoh worked alongside them so they would be motivated to work hard. The Talmud tells us that Pharaoh was no fool. Actually, Pharaoh was a brilliant, evil, but brilliant person. And the first thing he did was he looked at these Jews who are good citizens, and they really like to get along with their Egyptian neighbors, and they like to be liked. And he says, we got to get out there and work, whatever they're building a city. And he goes out with his own tools, and he says, "Everybody get out there. Let's go. I'm with you. I got my pail and you got yours." So of course the Jews come along. And then eventually, while they're working, so everybody else get out, leave them working. But he got them out there willingly. Now, so what happens? When the Jews first compelled the Jews to work for them, Pharaoh worked alongside them so they would be motivated to work hard. The tribe of Levi, one of the tribes, this was at the beginning, it was voluntary, right? So everybody's going, they want to be good citizens. The tribe of Levi want to be good citizens, but they weren't going to do this. Why? They recall that years and years before, when Jacob passed away, he had forbidden his son Levi. The tribe of Levi is named after somebody named Levi. Levi was one of Jacob's sons, and he was given a blessing from Jacob that he would be kind of the minister to the people's spiritual needs. The Kohen is a subsection of Levi. When we had a temple, it was the Kohen and the Levi who were all part of the Levi tribe. They were really ministering to our needs in the temple, and it started from there. Levi was a minister. So because of that, Jacob said, "Don't carry my casket," because Levi's sons would one day carry the Holy Ark. It says one day there'll be a temple, there'll be an ark. You're going to be having our Hebrew people will become a Jewish people, and your descendants will have to carry holy articles. My corpse is dead. God is life. Don't carry my casket. Therefore, since the Levites knew that they had to be kind of different in their approach, they didn't engage in what was menial labor, which they weren't being snobby about it, but they knew that that Jacob had destined them for holy work. Therefore, they did not join the work with Pharaoh. The Levites therefore refused to submit to Egypt, and Pharaoh did not compel them. It turned out that only those who chose to be subject, that first they remained in bondage. So those who were there, what? So this is the way this rabbi, Cheskel ben Manoach, the way he reads it, that's just the way it evolved. Nachmanides, a great in 2b, a great from the 1200s, he says it was actually much more deliberate. It is the custom of every nation to have wise people who preserve and pass on the nation's heritage. Pharaoh released the tribe of Levi from bondage so they could serve as the wise men and elders of the people. And all of this was orchestrated by God in heaven. So Nachmanides says it's also on a basic psychological level. We see from different things in the Talmud that Pharaoh, as evil as he was and horrible to what he did, he wanted to get he understood human resources. And he wanted to get the most out of his people. So for instance, they had one day off. He gave them Saturdays off. Why? Not because he believed in Shabbos, but because you run a machine 7 days a week, 24/7, something's going to happen. You want to give them some time to refresh themselves. That's why you get the best work out of it.
Now,
yes.
Is the Pharaoh that put this edict down the same Pharaoh who Joseph served?
So that would be impossible because it's a couple hundred years later. But even when it started, because when this shifted from seeing Jews, I don't know if everyone online was able to hear this. The question was, and this is the same Pharaoh who Joseph served. So the language of the Torah is that a new Pharaoh, a new king arose, and therefore policy shifted. So it sounds like in the surface language of it is there was a Pharaoh who understood and had a good relationship with the Jews and appreciated what he had done to save the nation. Then you have the new generation, the young generation, and say, who's that? And therefore, the new leader was oppressive to them. There is an opinion in the Talmud, there was actually the same one, but he showed a new face when it started. In this period of time, for sure, it's not the same one.
Understood.
Okay.
But I mean, the question though is the one who worked with, who had Joseph working for him, the one who initiated the cities?
That's it's a debate. Like almost everything else, right? So right now, you have the Levites are they're exempt, which means Moses, Miriam, and Aaron are exempt. So when Pharaoh says to him, says to them, actually, to Moses and Aaron, go back to your labors in text 1, it couldn't mean they're laborers in the field. They weren't supposed to be doing that. They were exempt from that. So what did Pharaoh, the question that comes up from any biblical commentator is when Pharaoh says to them, what are you doing? You're creating a ruckus. You're disturbing the people from their work and just go back to your labors. What labors will that refer to? So the primary commentary in the Torah is text 3, Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, and it was 11th century, and he says, go to your labors that await you in your homes. You got to have something to do at home. Go home, clean the house, do whatever you got to do. Just get out of my sight and go back to your business, which is not as a slave, but you have your own business. The tribe of Levi was exempt from bondage. And the proof of that is that Moses and Aaron came in and out of the palace at will. They weren't coming in and out as slaves. They came out in and out. They were acting like free people. Why were they acting like free people? Because the Levi tribe was exempt, either because that's the way it evolved, because it didn't come that first day, or because Pharaoh said, something, you need to have wise people. And that's good for it keeps you in good shape. That's what I was starting to say before. I'm sorry that he implemented certain things to help in human resources. One was a day off. Another one was to have people who can keep them going, give them enough inspiration to keep them going. So if that was the case, where they're going, what labors were they going to, go take care of yourselves. Go get a manicure. Just go away and leave the people alone.
Was the Levies, in a way, servants of the Pharaoh?
What?
Were the Levies, in a way, servants of the Pharaoh because they took care
Like
of
like
the-
capos?
something like that, or like, let's say, Orthodox Church and the communist czars.
I would hope, I've never, I understand why you're asking the question. I don't see it from that way. I can't, I've never seen anything that indicates that members of the tribe of Levi were like that. Usually the way that we have it in our history is that the tribe of Levi were the ones who were able to go around and keep people, some sense of ability to go on. They were encouraging the people.
But they didn't give them a hope or thoughts of the rebellion.
Of the
Rebellion
no.
until Moses came.
That's true, but we're going to talk about rebellion in a second. Rebellion was pretty much off the table for them, but thoughts of eventual redemption, they would try. Eventual freedom. But that was going to be from God. And it's not exactly on point, but we're going to get there to something that does deal with it. And pretty soon. So in text 4, we have a different perspective and was go to your labors. In the Medrash, it tells us, Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Levi, said, it's a different Levi, the tribe of Levi was exempt from backbreaking labor. But Pharaoh said to Moses and Aaron, you propose to leave Egypt and go worship your God because you have too much time in your hands. Therefore, go join the rest of the Jews in slave labor. He said, I've been nice to you guys. I've been letting your whole tribe go and you're ministering to people. You're driving me crazy. Get into the field and work with them. Well, you're no better than them. So go to your labors could mean two different things. Go to your labors in the commentaries. Either you go home or go actually to slave labor. Now, what does that have to do? What does that mean? How do we interpret that? And this is we're getting more to what today's topic is. Here's from the Rebbe, text 5. Pharaoh was a very wise man. That's what we're in our history. And he had a strong logical argument. And this is, I'll stop there for a second and go to what Gennady brought up before. These are Hebrews. They weren't, after a few hundred years of being slaves, they were not very connected to their family heritage. We're told they held on to their Hebrew names, they held on to certain type of dress, they still spoke Hebrew, but the soul of what it meant to be Hebrew, the monotheism, was very, very much slipping away. But they had a tradition, and at least some of them remembered it. Their ancestor Abraham had a vision from God about inheriting the land of Israel in the future. And one of the things God told Abraham hundreds of years earlier was that his and Sarah's descendants would be slaves for hundreds of years to a foreign power, not to Egypt, didn't spell out Egypt, but to a foreign power. And then eventually they would be redeemed. So, and the language was 400 years. That's what God told Pharaoh, told Abraham. So they knew this. So in a way, Gennady, there was something in their head, they were just living out destiny. There was no thought of rebellion. Partially because it seems like, and the language of the Talmud and the Medrash is, no one, Jew or Hebrew or not, ever thought of escaping Egypt because they had an iron grip on the border. And the language is pretty clear about that they were very, very tough on ability to control their people. And there was also a psychological, almost a religious thing, was like, give it up. This is our destiny for now. So by every natural consideration, the Jews had no hope of being liberated from Egypt. As our sage stated, no slave could escape from Egypt, not only Hebrew. No slave could escape from Egypt. They had an iron grip. Moreover, this state of bondage was also consistent with God's heavenly decree. For God had decreed that the Jews would remain in Egypt for 400 years, and only 210 years had elapsed. So where are they going? Nowhere. They have to persevere, keep their nose to the grindstone, and wait for their great descendants to be able to be taken out.
And
Now-
the knowledge of 400 years was given to common Jewish slaves, sorry, Hebrew slaves from the Cohens. From what Levi, sorry.
I don't know if from Levi, it was a family tradition. I'm sure they all knew this. I'm sure the entire family knew this for
But
many
they
years.
were priests.
Yeah.
So they were the ones that teaching religion to the common folk, right?
You have trauma from Levi's?
No,
No,
this is a fine. They would call it a fine.
I don't know that I know you're building a case,
Mhm.
and you're welcome to make it. I don't see it that way. I don't know, and I have no proof. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything, a source to say that it was only the Levites who carried this tradition. If it was a family tradition, it could have persisted in every tribe. They were not big on their traditions, although they did keep their language, dress, and what was the language, dress, and names. But
At the time, there was no writing, so the only way this information come from
it
the,
was oral. Okay, so
and the only people who didn't have to do the labors and can pass the oral would be Levites.
we're all free to speculate. Yeah.
Just logically.
Interesting speculation. For God had decreed that the Jews remain in Egypt for 400 years, only 200 years had elapsed. So now Pharaoh uses this argument. Pharaoh is basic. When Pharaoh says to Moses, get out of here, go to your work, what he's saying is, stay in your lane. Why do you set out to change both nature and God's wishes? So we are stronger. Your people are weaker. We're in control. You're the controllee. We're the master, you're the slaves. You think you're going to wish that away? Get real. Not only that, even by your own internal bookkeeping, what do you think you're going to accomplish with this? Leave this alone. Go do something else. Go to your labor. Go study Torah. Let the question of Jewish bondage be resolved by the world's natural pattern. You guys are priests, right? Go priest. Do what you got to do, but this is nature. You're in different worlds. You are living in an ivory tower. You want to wish this away. You want to pray this away. It doesn't work that way. We're in the natural world. You're not going to get rid of my soldiers with your praying. So go to your labors, means go study and pray. Leave me alone. Yes.
Okay, but the first line of Exodus is, and there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. Now, if he's such a scholar, how could he not know Joseph?
Well, see, right. That's an excellent point, but the point is similar to what we said before. Is that he acted as though he didn't know Joseph. In other words, he didn't recognize. He didn't carry the appreciation of Joseph. Mm-hmm. So to this point, the Pharaoh is saying a very logical argument. So you're coming with the wrong tools. I control society. I have an army, and I have slaves. And you think that with ideas you're gonna free slaves, you're swimming in the wrong pool. Go to your world of ideas. And for good measure, even if you're in the world of ideas, remember your grandfather Abraham? I'm playing out what was told to him. So go home and go pray and go study, go do what you got to do. Now, Moshe rejects that idea. Why doesn't Moshe accept it? And here's a very important point. And kind of what we started with before. I started with before is that God, in Torah thinking, I have to take care of myself, but I have to take care of myself for a purpose. There's a deeper purpose to me taking care of myself, because I got to take care of others. And what do I have? Is it that I have now two purposes, take care of myself and take care of others? No, I have one purpose. The purpose is do what God wants of me. And what God wants of me is for me to, take my shower, eat my yogurt and get dressed, and to help people who need help. it's not, you can't bifurcate it that way. I take care of myself, and I take care of others, and I take care of you, and I take care of animals. I do what I gotta do. And so it's really, it's not as multi-themed as it may look on the outside. If the goal is about doing what God wants me to do. So in looking at life, the idea, what Moses is saying, you think that Torah ideas are this in the realm of the theoretical, of the spiritual, or even of the divine, and then there's nature. There's no such thing. Nature is an expression, needs to be an expression of what God wants it to be. Who created this all? Who gives all of us life? So yes, on the surface, you're showing me a dichotomy. I believe in God, believes in goodness, and you are able to persevere in evil. Got it. So you're saying, stick with your goodness and let me deal with my evil. It doesn't work that way. I'm going to push, to find, so that the goodness of life comes out. Because these people deserve to be free. And it's not it can't be that way and separate into a world of nice theory and the actual harsh world we live in. No, this harsh world we live in has just beneath the surface, it's godly reality. And it's up to me, Moses saying, it's up to us and up to you to allow that we can bring out its godly reality. And in this case, it means let these people be free. Now here, the text, because it's trying to make that point, pivots to looking at who Moses was. What do we know about Moses? We know very little about Moses, actually, in the way from the scripture itself. We know that he's born in the tribe of Levi, and his mother's name was Yocheved. And then it says something like this. It says in this week's Torah portion, when he's born, it says, and the woman conceived and gave birth to a son, and she saw that he was good. Now, what was good about him? The Zohar, the book of the primary book of Kabbalah, asks us what made him good. Rabbi Chia said he was born circumcised, and Rabbi Yossi said she saw the light of God in him. The moment he was born, the entire house filled with light. Why did Mama Yocheved call him good? She saw him, and instantaneously she knew it was good. And what does good mean? So the Zohar brings two of the ancient rabbinic opinions. One is that when she looked, she said, "Oh my God, he's born circumcised," and they've been circumcising since Abraham. So she knew about that, but that's usually it's something we got to do. So there's something special about this boy. Or when he was born, she saw light. Now, what that's, let me just see what it says. Before we go to 6b, let me just explain this a little bit. What is circumcision? Actually, I'm gonna maybe we'll just go. Can we do a stop and share? I don't know how to do this. Maybe not. I don't know. It's kind of stop. Yeah. Has this been showing? I hope so. Uh-oh. Have you guys been seeing the text?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. You can get back to that in a second. Actually, let me get back to it. I'll get back to it when I'm reading the next one. I apologize for that. Hasn't been a great morning on my Zoom end. What is circumcision? We say that the verse tells us that, and actually I'll bring it up now just for a second so you can look at it. And that's the one, right? Yes. Can I just go one up? So this verse says the woman conceived and a son. This woman is Yocheved. That's that is Moses' mother, and she saw he was good. And there's these two opinions. What means good? It's either good is that actually someone is in the chat. I guess you may have been telling me the text not being zoned for Zoom. I'm sorry, Leon. Sorry, I didn't see that. That either was good or filled with light. Now, what is circumcision? What does circumcision represent for us, and what does it mean it was born circumcised? Circumcision is a practice we have. What does it mean? It's kind of odd. I would think for someone just looking at it, right? Circumcision is a focus on a bodily organ, which represents, first of all, on the one hand, it represents within the human condition the ability for pleasure and self-gratification. It also represents the possibility of pleasure in giving to another and joining with another, which is holy, and of creating life. So the overlay, the foreskin, represents in Jewish thinking the selfishness that can be in the pursuit of pleasure. And removing the foreskin conceptually is taking that layer of me out of the pursuit of pleasure, so that it is a holy exercise in the union of people, of two loving people. That's the way it's. So it's not only about the act of intimacy, which obviously it is. It's really a conceptual of similar to, if I got up this morning, told you I had my yogurt. I had my yogurt. Is it about me? I like yogurt with granola, so I enjoy it. Or is it about my enjoyment? Or do I think that I need to, it's okay for me to eat something I like, but is it about me being a strong, a human being with energy and the capacity to do what I need to do to make an impact on the world? So am I eating to give myself strength to be who God wants me to be, or am I eating to be able to add to my pleasure quotient? Torah says that just eating something because it looks good and you're not hungry, you just want to be able to eat something because it's pleasurable. It's not a sin. It's nothing immoral about it. So, but that's there's a foreskin there. It's all about my pleasure. One would hope, and eating is just one area of physical life, that we have our physical lives without the foreskin, where we are partaking and enjoying, but it's with there's other centeredness where we're looking to make a difference, to connect with people, and to make lives better for people. So when Moses is born without a foreskin, this fits straight into the concept of him being able to see the world from a very pristine place, that he's not sucked in by all the glitter and the sizzle and the pleasures of the world, because he sees their purpose. Now, that's born circumcised. The idea of the world, the room filling with light, is a little different, because light is about sharing and illuminating others. If I light a candle for myself, other people in the room can benefit too. So here, it's not only about him being able to see and approach the world from a pristine, holy place, but that he's sharing. One is a little bit more transcendent, and one is engaging of the world. So this is Moses as we see him. So now, I'm sorry, David. So we're going to go to text 6b. And I'm sorry, everyone, that I didn't have my.
Are you recording?
Yes, we're recording finally. Then I got it. That's one of the things I checked off today. Okay, because someone reminded me. Text 6b. This is from the Rebbe. He says we find that Moses excelled in two areas, and that's reflected from the way the Zohar tells us what happened when he was born. A, he was superior and perfect. He was born right. He didn't even need a bris. But the point is that he had this very pristine, holy perspective, a very balanced and insightful perspective on life, not getting distracted and engaged by the sideshows. The fact that God chose him from all of humanity indicates that he was spiritually exalted, as he was above worldliness and completely attached to God. Now, B is, even before this, we didn't read about yet, they said he was a shepherd. He was a shepherd of sheep. He took care of the sheep. The Medrash tells us the reason God chose him was because how he would run after a little sheep that was astray. He wanted, not only because he didn't want to lose the money, because he cared about each individual sheep, so he would care about each individual person of his people. And he had achieved perfection as a shepherd. He provided for every material and spiritual need of the Jewish people and through them to the world at large. So in other words, the first highlights his transcendence, while the latter indicates his willingness to descend from his transcendent state. He was very holy in his perspective, but he was also engaged. Both of these traits were in him immediately upon birth. Being born circumcised speaks to his personal perfection and transcendence. Such births are not natural. It tells us that he was completely irradiated by his godly soul without the hindrance of a foreskin or evil inclination. The fact that God's light filled the house upon his birth indicated that he would share his rare light and teachings with the Jews in particular and with the world at large. So what he represents this oneness, where he sees the world in a meaningful way, and he sees that that's what his job is, to spread that meaning, not just to live in his own meaningful bubble. Along these lines, if we look in text 7, back to this week's Torah portion, one of the things it says that Moses, again, we're not told much about him growing up, but it says Moses grew up, and actually says it twice. Maybe he grew up one level and then grew up another level. So doesn't Rashi, the primary commentary on the Torah, says Moses grew up? Yes, doesn't already state that the child grew up? And Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Eloi, said the first is for growth in height. In other words, that he physically, biologically grew up. And second is for growth in stature. For Pharaoh appointed him Lord over the royal palace. Another way of saying in height, isn't only he grew that he was 6 feet tall, and that he grew as a human being. He developed into a good human being. Or he grew also in stature. He became manager of the palace. Those are two very different tracks, one would say. One is being a very good person, so he meditates and he's focusing on personal character improvement. And one is you're a good manager. And what the Torah is saying, they go together. You want to be a good manager, be a good person. And if you want to be a good person, don't just keep it in your own little room. Go out there and share it. Text 8. Moses encompasses, all right, we're still with them, okay? His personal perfection, both traits. His personal perfection, his attachment and oneness with God. This was the transcendental mode. In Rashi's words, the first is growth in height. Growth in height, again, what he's saying, it doesn't mean, 5'10" or 6'2", but it means as a human being, personally growing. And B is his perfect ability to share with others in the lower world, in Rashi's words. In Rashi's words, the second is for growth in stature for Pharaoh and appointed him Lord over the royal palace. So he does not see this as a bifurcated system. Like I said to Hillel, take care of myself, take care of others. If I don't take care of others, what am I? But if I don't take care of myself, how can I take care of others? It's not saying that the two lanes is a false distinction. Moses is positing, which is like Pharaoh saying, "Go stay in your spiritual world and leave this world to me." He says, "There's no such thing. There's one world. There's one reality. We just have to bring out the inner reality of reality." And in that sense, there is the idea of in ourselves, when we look at ourselves, to see ourselves as detached from those around us, certainly those we care about, and even those we don't necessarily care about, but we're living in the same world, is also a false distinction. Just about me. I'm going to take care of myself. And in text 9, we find the Mendy says, all Jews are responsible for each other. This may be compared to a ship that was pierced in a single cabin. We do not say only one cabin is vulnerable. Rather, we say the entire ship has been made vulnerable. The Jewish people are the same. In other words, it's saying to say that. I mean, obviously, nobody thinks that if they drill a hole in their cabin floor, all they're doing is, I'm looking. Life doesn't mean anything for me anymore. Everyone else can live, and I'm going to just drown myself. You're taking everyone with you. And if there's a hole in someone's cabin floor, it's not whether I want to go help someone. I'm helping myself by helping them. We're all connected. And that idea of the distinction, as much as there is a distinction, because look, Torah-wise, my property is my property. You're not allowed to take it. Because it's my property, and I'm not allowed to take your property. That's a Torah thing. But for me to say my property is my property, and therefore I don't need to make sure that other people benefit from my property, at least some of it. It's a false distinction, because we're all in this together. And if you look in text 10, from the Rebbe, he wrote this to this is someone who would give. We have a Torah responsibility to tithe. We give percentage of our earnings to charity. What happens if it's not a good year? If someone tells me, I run a charity, someone tells me it didn't have a good year, they can't help out. I say, I'll give you a hug, and I hope things go well. Or, I don't know how much to give you, but I hope you can take care of yourself. In truth, in the thinking, one would say, if, as the Rebbe told someone here in text 10, in response to your letter about your wonderful 37-year-old custom to tithe from your earnings to charity, you write that you expect a deduction, probably means a reduction. It's in your future earnings, in which case you'll be unable to tithe. And you ask how to proceed, whether you must seek an annulment from your presumed commitment to continue to tithe. Because when we do something positive continuously, it's considered as though we took a vow. This is most surprising, writes the Rabbi. Why would you ask this question when the best possible outcome and the wisest course of action is to continue your wonderful custom and demand that God, the creator of the world, the orchestrator of its affairs, enable you to do so with peace of mind, good health, joy, and gladness of heart? What did Pharaoh say? Pharaoh said, the world is reality. You're living in a dreamland. Go ahead, dream, daven, pray, study. In the real world, I'm boss. I'm master, you're slave. And Moses is saying, no such thing. In the real world, God is the master. And if God wants you to let them go, you're going to let them go. So why don't you play along? The Rebbe is telling this person the same thing. You're saying the reality is economy's down, there's inflation, there's whatever is going on at that time, and you can't give. That is reality. But dig deeper in reality. Who gives us the blessings for reality? God. So instead of saying, I can't continue doing this mitzvah, why don't you do it and say to God, now it's up to you. You got to keep fueling me. We're partners in this. Fuel me. Actually, I know someone who actually has never given anything here, and I've never asked him, but he funds primarily Chabad on campus, Chabad all around the world, millions of dollars a year. And in 2008, he took a big hit in his And it's not my business, I don't do his bookkeeping, but I figured that the Chabad on campus is going to have some hard times because he's really feeling. And I heard after he had a conference call with them, and he said that times are tough. He says, but I'm gonna kick it up a little bit this year because I'm not going to give into this. God's going to have to help me out here. And listen, he does well. He doesn't. I don't have to collect from him for Shabbos. I think he's okay, and I think he did well that year also. But it was an attitude that was very inspiring to me. He said because the whole world would have understood. I mean, all his beneficiaries would have understood. Listen, he did really well. He's going through a tough time. Hopefully, things will continue. But he took this attitude. And here it concludes with a blessing for good tidings about all of the above. So now, let's take this away from the physical and from the charity and talk about what we can give to others. We all have neighbors. We all have a sphere of influence. We have co-workers. We have friends. Nobody likes to be lectured to and missionized to. And so you really, I would not be the one to encourage you to go home and knock on your neighbor's door and say, have you thought about God today? It's probably not going to come across well. On the other hand, if we are in conversation with people, and it's natural conversation with people, well, just like you might share what you heard about a good stock tip, or you might share about something that you heard, about government policy that might be interesting or beneficial to your friend. You might share about when was the last time you went to church, or to seminary, or whatever it is. God. It's if we really believe that it's a good thing, and we really believe that people need it. So it's not only they need a good stock tip, or a good attorney, or a good doctor. They need a healthy soul. Everybody, Jew and non-Jew. So here in text 11, we go back to Abraham. The conduct of Abraham, our patriarch, is demanded of each of us. He came to places where God, Judaism, and even Hebrew proficiency were unknown. He set aside his personal preferences, and rather than calling out to God, he taught others to call. Not only that, he teaches them about it, he created such an interest and an enthusiasm in people that they themselves start to spread it. We must know that if we want to succeed in our relationship with God, we must assist others in their relationship with God as well. We must see to it that others not only know God, but also call out to God. Although they knew nothing heretofore, we must help them declare that there is a God in the world. This is an idea of spiritually caring for our neighbors. And again, and that's telling you to lecture anyone. It's not to care. If we really care, if someone mentions to me that they have a medical need, and I know a doctor who's good with this, I'm not getting a cut. But if I care, I would say, if I care about the person telling me, I say, listen, I can give you a number of someone who might be able to help you. If they have a need in some legal need, and I know someone who has a good track record, even if it's someone I'm behind them on the line in ShopRite, why shouldn't I help a human being? I'll share the name of someone who can help. Why is this any different? And the Rebbe wants to bring that up, but he's talking a lot of what he's talking to observant people who can get very satisfied with their own sense of spirituality and connection with God, and they don't want to be bothered in going out and dealing and talking about God to people who don't speak the same language conceptually. So there is a phrase that the Rebbe will use from his father-in-law, which is text 12. What good is Hasidic life and piety if the main quality, caring for each other, is lacking? The core of Chabad Hasidic life is to care about people. That means help change a tire. It means, a tip for a good doctor. It means, would you like to put on tefillin? It's all the same thing. If we put on tefillin, I don't get any bonus. There's no scoreboard. Why would I want to put on tefillin with someone? because they may not realize it's good for them, but I'm thinking, I think it is. So if you have a couple minutes, let's do it. It should come not out of being a nuisance, not out of boredom. It should come from this idea. I'd like to be able to help you out. You want to do this? And that's the core of who we are. And that's, he said, how much more so if we, God forbid, become the cause of another's anguish. Along these lines, and I've mentioned this before, the chairman of the board at the Rabbinical College in Marston, the yeshiva, where my father is and I am, he was a very wealthy man, David Chase, his name, and he was not a ritually observant person, but actually the Rebbe gave him tefillin, and he used to put on tefillin every day. And I remember the Rebbe speaking in 1983. Before there were thousands of people there, and David Chase happened to be there too. He would come once a year, and the Rebbe told a story about a man. It was about Chase. The Rebbe never mentioned people's names, but it was about him, and that he was on his yacht, and he had a new, I don't know what you call a driver, captain, whatever, of his yacht, and he kept asking from his cabin. He would ask which way is east. Just putting up in the morning. We put on tefillin. Like I said, his windows didn't go all four sides. So he, after a few times, because he wanted to pray, wanted to put on tefillin and pray. After a few times, this captain said, "If you want to learn about navigation, come down and I'll teach it to you." He said, "I don't care about navigation. I pray every day." And I just need to know. And he actually did not even say a word to this guy, who was Catholic. But a short while later, this man came over to Mr. Chase and said, "If you're a guy who has so much, everything you need, and you take time to think about God every day, I think I'm going to go back to church and try it out." And the Rebbe used that as an example, a beautiful, inspiring example of how we can inspire the world. He didn't lecture him, he didn't say anything, he was just a role. And it wasn't a joke. But it was about bringing the gift of higher thinking and godliness. So we'll go to number 13. And this is also from the Rebbe. So when we see a fire burning in a Jewish home, it means in a home of someone who we care about, right? We're not unless we're firefighters. We don't sit down and consider whether to save our fellow from the flames. We would never ask, may I or should I intrude into my fellow's affairs? Truth is, anybody. If I drove by and I saw flames coming out from a window, from an attic, I think hopefully I would stop in and knock on the door and make sure they know. No one would ever ask such questions when seeing another on fire. We would never ask whether our actions are correct according to this or that school of thought. We would rush to help. If this is true when someone's physical life and livelihood are at stake, it is much truer when someone's spiritual life is at stake. There's no justification for such questions. Rather, we must do all that we can to save another from the pit of destruction. The Rebbe would use this consistently as a metaphor for why we have to get out there and try to help people with their consciousness of godliness. So, because it's a spiritual fire. Don't ask them any questions. It's okay. Well, it's a little bit of a chutzpah. It's a chutzpah. I wouldn't have the goal to go knock on someone's door now and ask them if they're Jewish and they want a mezuzah if they're a stranger. I mean, maybe 30 years ago, but it's not a normal thing, but it's a normal thing, and hopefully a respected thing. If you see flames coming out of their attic, you're saying, God, it's okay. See it that way. People need spirituality. Be nice, be polite. But be conscious. Key points 16. First, Pharaoh told Moses to worry about himself rather than be concerned about the Jewish slaves. Pharaoh also told Moses about that Moses' lofty ideas were not relevant in the real world. Moses rejected both arguments. Moses' entire life was devoted to the idea that there aren't two worlds, a spiritual world of godly ideas and a world of pragmatic reality. Rather, the God of the higher world controls the lower world, and he has the final say in both worlds. Next, number 3. Similarly, the same God who wants me to provide for myself and my family wants me to provide for others and their families. Neglecting either is inconsistent with God. The 4th is when we appear to have enough resources to provide for only one, we must continue to look after others and God, who sustains others, and God, who sustains the entire world, will grant us the resources to do both. And finally, this truth applies whether the assistance that others require is material or spiritual. So I'm going to stop the share here. And if there are any questions, I can deal with those. If anybody would like a book, I know at least one of you bought a book online. I can send you the link. Otherwise, we have some books here. You can buy it on Amazon, apparently. What a great country. So have a great week, everyone. Oh, Tefillin. Steve Applebaum's holding up his tefillin. Okay, great. Now you can totally, Steve, then I'm comfortable with this being virtual. Okay, be well.
Rabbi, I had a question for you that I had
sure.
sent.
You caught me before I hit it.
And this goes way back, as this all does. How do you rectify, or is there an inconsistency between the two stories of creation? The first that you get 7 days, 6 days, and then seventh rest, and then the next goes into it more deeper. That man, it comes from dust, and is it one is just a broad overview, and then it goes into more detail?
Yeah, so the Talmud talks about it. It says it gives it roughly speaking, it gives an overview, and then it gets into the actual crux of it, because humanity, with the capacity for self-awareness and moral choices, is really what it's all about. So giving the overview of what humanity is charged with tackling and elevating, and then starts getting to the human story.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You are. Bye.
Be well.